chain 2, RND 1, work 5 SC in the second CH from hook, join in first ST, 5 SC. What? Hi, it's Sonia here of The Pretty Stitch with today's episode of Yarn Matters. So you've either started to learn to crochet or knit and you thought, you know what, I'd like to try to make a pattern. But I look at these patterns and I can't make heads or tails out of it. So today's video, I thought we would go over about some tips and tricks on how to read crochet or knit patterns. So today we are going to go over two patterns, a crochet pattern and a knit pattern, and I'm just going to go over some tips and tricks on how to go about reading the patterns so that you don't get overwhelmed and so that you can be successful when you are working on a pattern. And I can link these patterns below. These are free patterns and I have a written pattern, and I also have videos for these patterns. But if this video is more if you want to learn how to read written patterns, because some people really don't like to crochet to a video. They would prefer just looking at something that is written, and some people prefer videos, some people like both. So I try to make tools available for different learning styles. So today we're going to go over about reading patterns. So my first pattern here that you can see is called Mima Stars, and it is a crochet pattern. So if you're looking at the pattern, sometimes what happens is people see a whole bunch of words, and so this is the cover page of the pattern, and they'll just see a whole bunch of words and they're just going to be completely overwhelmed. And this could be, you know, because you have some issues with reading's a little hard for you, or your brain just sees a bunch of words and you're just like, nope, too much, I can't do it. So I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to make it a little bit easier when you're reading a pattern so that you don't get so overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean that you're a poor reader or you're dumb or anything like that. I think it's just the way our brains work sometimes. And I am not an expert by any means about reading, but I have in the past worked with some kids in a youth group that had some reading issues. And these are just some tips that I thought I would share that would translate into working on patterns too, that used to help the kids that I worked with. So what I would do when we were reading something, a lot of times the kids would just stare at the whole page and be like, nope, I can't do it, it's too hard, it's too much. And so after I would say, yes, you can do it, we are going to break it down and make it a little bit easier for you so you're not so overwhelmed. So why don't we just look at this pattern as a whole first, and then we will go about breaking it down. So this is my pattern, Mima Stars, and at the top of the pattern here it says about this pattern, and I just give a little blurb about, why I wrote the pattern, what it is. So they're mug rugs, and they were inspired by my mom, who is called Mima, so that's why it's called Mima Stars. And then I do have a video for this pattern, so there is the link that you can see that says stars. So if you would get this written pattern, you just click on that link and it would take you right to the video. So I think a good pattern should have a cover page, and it should have some necessary information so that you can be successful when you make the pattern. And I don't want to say that I am a complete expert about pattern writing, but I have written patterns. I've written patterns for publications, so I've been around the block a little bit. And I kind of have a formula now that I like to use when I write patterns, which I, find to be helpful for the people that are using them. So I think a good pattern should have what it's about, and I like to give a level. So right on here I have crochet level, and I would call this advanced beginner. So that means you need to know some basic stitches, some basic techniques. This pattern worked in the round, so that means you're working in a circle, and it does use some basic stitches. So after that, as you can see, I have materials needed. So it's telling you what you need to make this pattern. So obviously you need a hook. So this pattern, I don't list a specific hook because you could use a couple different hook sizes. Let's say you only have an H size hook or a 5mm hook, that would work perfectly fine for this pattern. Now for these samples that you see in the pictures, I did use a size I or 5.5mm hook. So if you keep going down and list the yarn, so this pattern does not require a lot of yarn. I just say just a few yards to make this project, and different yarn weights will work. So different yarn weights, what that means is there is worsted weight yarn, that's number 4. There's decate weight yarn, which is number 3. There's also sport weight yarn, which is closer to a number 2. So the lower the number, the lighter or thinner the yarn. I also have on here, so I have sport, DK, worsted, and Aran. So I feel that any of those types of yarns would work well for this project. And I do suggest on there cotton, bamboo, or a linen yarn. And the reason why is because you do need to block the project a little bit so that your mug rugs lay flat, and just so that your project can look its best. So when you're looking at a pattern, definitely look on the materials that are needed and try to get something, especially if you're just starting out with making a pattern, try to get close to what the designer suggests. Now as you get farther in your crochet or knit journey and get a little more skilled with working with patterns, you can often substitute things. You can change the hook sizes or needle sizes, but if you're just starting out, I would definitely go with what the designer suggests so that your project can be successful. So farther down it says gauge, and gauge, as I say on here, is not crucial for this pattern, so it doesn't really matter what your gauge is. The only thing that does matter is, and I don't usually put this in my patterns, it should be just a given when you are knitting or crocheting a pattern, just try to make sure your tension is even. So that means that your stitches basically all look the same when you're doing your project. So if we're looking further in this pattern here, now I have stitch abbreviations used in this pattern, and I find that good patterns will have this, because especially if you are a newer crocheter or knitter and you don't know the abbreviations, you have no idea what they mean, and then you have to Google them or look back, and that can be annoying or frustrating. So I try to list them in my pattern so they're right there, so the person, whoever's making it, can refer back. So as you can see, a CH means a chain, a DC means a double crochet, HDC half double crochet, so on and so forth. So going back to how to make reading a pattern a little bit easier, so you don't get so overwhelmed. So what some people do, they like to read over the whole pattern. And some patterns can be quite long, and personally, I don't always recommend this. Now, if you're definitely a more skilled person and you love to read and you love seeing lots of words, then go for it. But sometimes when you're just looking at a pattern and you're not working it at the same time, just reading it, it doesn't always make sense. And you might think, oh, this is wrong. I don't know what they mean by this. I'm completely confused. So I don't always suggest doing that. I do suggest reading the title page, what we just went over, and then just starting in on the pattern and just trusting the process and trusting what the designer has. Okay, so to break this down, what I'm going to show you is what I used to do for my kids. Is I would just cover up sections of the page we were reading so that it was just a couple lines. So if reading is not your favorite thing and you see a lot of words and you're just like, whoa, this is too much, cover it up. Take a piece of paper, if you print it out, and just cover it up. Or what you can do, if you're, let's say you're using a Kindle or your computer, you can blow it up, and you might need to, like me, because I'm getting older now, so I need my words bigger sometimes. So I would definitely suggest increasing the font size, and then that will get rid of some words and you're only just seeing bits of it. So right here I am showing an example of, I enlarged it pretty good here, and so now you just see the title of the pattern, about this pattern, crochet level. and materials needed is cut off. So I would start by doing that if you're getting super overwhelmed with seeing a bunch of words. Blow it up, or if you printed it out, cover it up and just read it section by section. It's a lot easier. I found it to be a lot easier for people that maybe would struggle with reading or their brains just got overloaded with too many words. Okay, so let's move on to the actual directions of the pattern and how to read it. So what I'm showing here are just 2 rounds of this pattern. Now this pattern, it's pretty short. It works up. You could, if you're a skilled crocheter, you could probably make this, in 15 minutes or less. So what I've done here is I have broken this pattern up so it's a little bit easier for reading. So when you're starting off, I have directions because these are the directions of the patterns. And sometimes with patterns, they will have notes. And if the designer has a note on there, don't ignore it. I find sometimes people will be like, oh, I don't really need to read that. Well, that might, impact what you're doing. And if you don't read it, you're not going to be successful with your project. So I have notes on there, and it's telling you that these mug rugs are made in rounds. So RNDS, if you don't know what that means, that is an abbreviation for round. So if you go back to the stitch abbreviations, it will tell you what that means. And most crochet patterns are written in abbreviations. So don't panic if you don't know the abbreviations. So if you don't know them, go look at the abbreviations and it should tell you what they are. And I do find that a good pattern will have that on there. Now there are some, they'll just assume that you know it, but because this is a beginner pattern, I think that a designer should have the abbreviations on there because a beginner might not know what they are, and that is frustrating if you have no idea what that means. So I try to put it on all my patterns, even if it is an advanced pattern. I just think it's helpful and nice. So you're going to learn that RNDS means round. So mug rugs are made in rounds. So that means they are made in a circle. And then I have all joins are made with a slip stitch. So SLST means slip stitch. So again, go back to your abbreviations and it should tell you what it is. So mug rugs are made in rounds, all joins are made with a slip stitch. So a join is when you're working in the round, you have to close it up. So that is how each round is closed in this pattern. So now that we've cleared up the notes, so we're going to continue to read. So chain 2. So now we're getting into what you need to do. So this pattern is telling you need to chain 2. So you work chain 2, and sometimes it will be abbreviated as CH2, and that would also mean chain 2. So now we're going down and it says RND1. So that means round. So this is round 1. And now it says work 5 SC, so that means single crochet. So again, you go back to your abbreviations and an SC will tell you that it's a single crochet. So we're going to work 5 single crochet in the second CH, so that is chain from hook, and then we're joining in our first ST, which is a stitch. So ST means stitch. So basically round 1, work 5 single crochet and the second chain from hook, join in first stitch. And then at the end, you'll see at the sentence, you'll see a dash and it's in italics, 5 SC. So what that is a stitch count. And I think most patterns, if it's a good pattern, should have stitch count, especially if stitch count's really important. Sometimes stitch count isn't important and then it won't be listed on the pattern, but I do find that a good pattern should have that on there. And that's just telling the maker, whoever's making the pattern, that they're on the right track. They're doing the right thing. They're doing what the designer wants. So your first round, you should have 5 single crochet at the end of the round. So now we go to round 2, and it is saying CH1, so that means chain 1 in first ST. So ST means stitch, work SC, DC, CH2, and DC. So all in that first stitch, so there's a lot going on in that first stitch. We're going to work a single crochet, a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet. So if somebody is just looking at this pattern and they're like, wow, that's a lot, like, I don't get this. That's why I find actually doing it makes a lot more sense, because that's a lot of stitches packed into one stitch and you might just think this is a hot mess, but it actually does work. And sometimes I find doing it, then things start to click and make sense. So don't necessarily disregard a pattern because when you're reading it at first glance, you're like, I don't get this. So give it a try, and sometimes you just have to trust the process, especially I think with crocheting. Knitting I think tends to be a little bit more straightforward, but crochet can be a little bit more fluid. So you kind of have to do it sometimes for things to start to make sense. So after we have all those stitches packed into that first stitch, you're going to see a little asterisk or a star, and it says in next ST, which is stitch, work SC, DC, chain 2, DC. So again, in the next stitch, you're going to pack in a single crochet, a double crochet, a chain 2, and a double crochet, all in that same stitch. And then after that, you see another star. So in between those two stars, you see in next stitch, work single crochet, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. And then after the second star, you're going to see REP, which means repeat, from star around, join in first stitch. So what does that mean? So when you see repeat from, so REP means repeat from star around. So everything that is in between those two stars, you're going to be repeating. So in each of those 5 stitches, you're going to repeat in next stitch, work single crochet, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, all the way around. And when you get to the end of that round, it says join in first stitch. So if you don't remember what join means, at the top of the notes it says all joins are made with a slip stitch. So a join is a slip stitch, and then you are done round 2. And again, you'll see in italics, there's the little dash. It says that you will have 5 chain 2 SP. SP means space. So you're going to have 5 chain 2 spaces after round 2. So now if we're breaking down this pattern some more, we're down at round 3. And round 3 begins with a chain 1, and then in your first stitch, you're going to work single crochet. And then it says half double crochet in next stitch. So HDC, we haven't seen HDC yet. If you go back up at your abbreviations, that means half double crochet. So you're going to half double crochet in your next stitch. And then in your next chain 2 space, so it's telling you what you're going to be working in, you're going to work your half double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, half double crochet. So in that next chain 2 space, you're packing in a lot of stitches. And you're just going to continue reading, work a HDC in next stitch, and then so HDC means half double crochet. So now you're back to that first star. So we're going to keep reading and keep stitching. So you're going to single crochet in that next stitch, half double crochet in the next stitch, and then in your next chain 2 space, you're working that half double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, half double crochet, and then it says work a half double crochet in next stitch, and then there's your second star. So now after that, it says repeat from star around. So after you have completed everything in between those stars, you're going to keep repeating that around until you get to the end of your round, and then it says again join in your first stitch. And then round 4, which is the last round, you're going to chain 1, and it says single crochet in first stitch. CONT means continue, and that should be in the abbreviations. Continue to single crochet until you reach the first chain 2 space. In next chain 2 space, work single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Continue to single crochet around and work single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in each chain 2 space. Join in first stitch and you will cut your yarn. So that one does not have stars. Some rounds or rows depending on what you're making. So these are rounds, so we're working in a circle, but sometimes you will work in a row, and not always will there be stars to tell you what to do. So you're probably wondering, why don't we just write it out in plain English or whatever language that you are working from? Well, it would be really long. I know there are some patterns that are written in just plain English, but this would be pages, well, it'd be a couple pages, and really it's only 4 rounds. It doesn't need to be that long. This pattern is just 2 pages. So abbreviations really help cut down on the words. So if you can learn the abbreviations, and it's okay if you don't know them right away, again, keep referring back to the stitch abbreviations to help you out, and the more patterns that you work, the better you'll start to remember. So that's just a tip I have for you there. So now we are at the end of the pattern, and I always include finishing in my patterns just to tell you how to make your project look its best. So this finishing says to weave in all your loose ends, so those are the tails, and blocking is highly recommended for this project to help your rug lay flat. So if you used the recommended yarns suggestions that I had in this pattern, whether it be cotton, linen, or bamboo, when you block this pattern, and if you're not sure what blocking is, I will place a link that talks all about blocking in the description box so you can learn. And blocking just helps your project look its best. And then underneath I just say who wrote the pattern, which is me. So no, I didn't copy this or anything. This is my own design. And then we do have pictures on the bottom that just demonstrates how the pattern is to be used. So I hope that helps with reading at least this crochet pattern. I do have a knit one that I can go over real quick. It's basically the same principles that we went over with the crochet one. That works with knit patterns as well. Okay, so here we have the knit pattern. It's called diagonal, and it's the same principles as the crochet pattern. Again, if it's too many words for you, you can blow it up to, cut off some of the page and just read it in sections. And then just like the crochet pattern, I do have stitch abbreviations that are used in this pattern, which I find to be helpful, especially if you are a newer knitter and don't know what all the abbreviations mean. This will help you out. So if we look on the next page of the pattern here, as you can see, it's the full page. Looks like a lot of rows, and this one is worked in rows. So again, if that is too overwhelming for you, cover up half of the page or blow it up so you only see half of it, and go from there and just take it line by line so that you don't overwhelm yourself. So I hope that was helpful in reading patterns. It might have been a lot of information. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!